Hi and welcome. Today we're working on RLCI, and in particular we're going to do some refactorings to the server component so that we can more easily flesh out the job execution controller part of this thing. RLCI is an experimental CI/CD system designed to solve problems I've had with Jenkins. I made a couple of videos about it too that you can check out if you're interested. So here we have the test file for the server and the server itself. So the server is a TCP server which communicate by sending JSON objects, line terminated JSON objects back and forth. So the test here gives you some idea on what the server is capable of now. So this test is like an integration end-to-end test of the server. So this part right here starts up a server process and provides this send function which you can send a command to the server and receive a reply. So here this test is an example use case of the server end-to-end. So the first part here sends a message called store pipelines. So when this test server starts up, it doesn't have any data, no pipelines, nothing. So the first step we do is to store pipelines, and we get the pipeline definitions by using the tool to compile this pipeline file. And in this case it just contains one pipeline with 2 stages. And we receive a reply with a status of OK and a list of pipeline IDs. So this any capture will capture this pipeline ID, so we can store it later here. Okay, so now the pipeline server knows about our pipeline. Next we send a trigger command. And the trigger command or trigger message is intended to tell the server that, hey, something happened. And in this case, the payload of the trigger is an arbitrary JSON object, and we say the type is test and the argument is 99. And we receive a reply with status OK and a list of execution IDs. So this is a list of all the pipeline executions that were started in response to this trigger. And we can see here that the stage here has a trigger on anything where type is test. So this matches this one. So this stage will be triggered with this as input. So next we send the command get pipeline to retrieve a pipeline from the database, and we use the pipeline ID that we received up here, and we want to check that this pipeline, first of all, it has a definition. We don't care about what that is, but we want to make sure that it has stored execution IDs for this pipeline, and it should be the same execution ID that we got back from this response. So the next part here is a for loop intended to wait for this execution to finish. So we send a message get execution with this execution ID. We get an execution back and we capture that. So if the status of the execution is done, then we assert that some values are set, and we break. Otherwise, we sleep for a bit, and if the for loop times out, well, we have waited a little while and we didn't get a response. Okay, so if the status is done, this is what we assert. So assert the status is done, and this execution also contains information about the different stages. So we have 2 stages, the ID 0 and ID 1, and we can see here that the ID 0 got this as input, and we also capture the logs from this execution of this stage and this one, and we assert that the logs for the first one here has the 99 printed to std out, which is the execution of this stage right here. Just echo the argument, and the argument comes from here. And yeah, the 1 is empty. You can also see here that it has status waiting, so we haven't actually executed the second stage, but the status of the pipeline is still marked as done. So this is the part that I want to flesh out next. Right now, everything is implemented in this server class. It does all of what we just saw on the left hand side. So here are all the messages that it handles, and when it gets the trigger, it calls self trigger, and it figures out what pipelines to trigger and what tasks to start, etc. And somewhere down here we actually start the tool to run an execution. So what I would like to do is to separate this task execution functionality away from the server, so that we can more easily test that part in isolation. And I'm also thinking this test right here is an end-to-end test, which contains a lot of stuff. So perhaps I also want to change that so that maybe this stage is not used. It just has one stage, and then we can do more tests of the job controller task execution functionality, making sure that, hey, this stage should actually trigger this stage before marking the pipeline as done. Because as it is right now, this test doesn't read correctly because status is still waiting here. So let's fix that to begin with. So let's remove this stage completely. And when we run those tests, something should fail. Yeah. So there is this stage 1 here that we expect that we didn't get. So let's see, where should we look? Stages 1, this should not exist. We don't need to logs capture 1. We don't need this one because this one doesn't exist. Okay, still getting some error. Children, yeah, children 1. So children doesn't have any children, so this was intended to store for task execution purposes to store the children and the parents, so we can more easily do that, but perhaps we should just exclude that altogether. I don't know. Let's leave it in. Something like that. So yeah, let's commit that. Yeah, so that was the first part. So we have, let's start that one again. We have a test suite that tests that this server does something and that it executes something and all that. And that looks okay. So now we can more safely refactor this server and try to extract this task execution functionality. So let's see what we've got here. So we have the server here. It gets a database and tasks. Okay. So maybe the first thing I want to do is to create a class for this task executioner. What should we call it? Let's call it stage executioner for now. It needs a database, and the tasks here are currently running stage executions, so it should make sense to put that one in here. Something like that. And this should fail because this task is not in here. So let's do task stage executioner. It's now in there. There we go. So that should work. Okay. So next, probably the trigger function should be, let's see, tasks are used in this trigger. Okay, so let's move the trigger function up here. And here, instead of calling self trigger, we call self.stage stage executioner trigger. And now the tasks can just be, let's see, this can be removed because the tasks is now in this one. Let's see if that works. No, it doesn't work. Okay, what's wrong? What did we miss? We get a status error. Stage execution object has no trigger matches. Okay, so trigger matches. Let's move this one as well down here. Okay, still not working. Status error. Stage executioner. Okay. Has no attribute create execution. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So the server now only has this handle request, and it delegates all messages to someone else. So most of them just go to the DB, but this trigger goes to the stage executioner. Okay, so let's commit that. So now it should be possible to test this one in isolation without involving the server, and I guess also without having to start like a separate process. We can write this more like a unit test. But we still need something useful in the database for this to work. but we can probably mock that. And it's also this part, if we want to write this one as a unit test. Another thing that's problematic is this execute stage. Let's see. This start process. Do we really want to start a process in the unit test? Yeah, so I'm thinking this right here, when we call the tool with the script from the stage, this is really the stage executioner. And this right here is more like managing all those stage executioners in the pipeline and calling them in the correct order and triggering each other. So perhaps this should not be called stage executioner, or there should be something else for stage executioner. So yeah, let's rename this one to let's call it job controller. Let's rename this one as well. That works. Let's commit that. And now let's extract something called stage execution. Executioner, maybe? I don't know. And let's see if this will get a stage executioner. Executioner. So that will not work. Job controller. Well, let's start the tests. Stage executioner. That should work. And what we want to put in that is execute this. This will start the process. Yeah, how about this one? This one needs a DB. Sure. So gets the DB. Sure. And then we can put the start process in there. And we can do self stage executioner. That works. Okay. Yeah, so now it should be possible to test the job controller in isolation with some kind of trigger, and yeah, so that's really what I wanted to flesh out, like testing that when we trigger one stage, when that finishes, it'll trigger the next, and yeah, if failure, it fails. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Maybe we have that now. So let's call this one extract. And let's now see if we can write a test for this. So here we have a test server. Let's just steal a bit of that. Sure. And test job controller. And let's call it test trigger pipeline or something. Okay, so we need a job controller. Job controller, it takes a DB and a stage executioner. DB, let's use an in-memory database, sure. How do we do that? DB create, DB, okay, and a stage executioner. Stage executioner, let's do a mock stage executioner. Okay, let's see. I wanted to have this part right here saved to create the pipeline for the database. Okay, so let's see, we need to import something, so from can we even import stuff here? I haven't really set this up. Okay. So let's see, what does the source, what does it look like? The source must be on the path, I guess. Wow. Let's just do this for now. So we go back one, and we go into source. Insert that, and then we can do from server import job controller from, and then we can do import DB as well. Okay, let's see what that does. Tool there is not defined. Yeah, it's not called tool there. It's called server there. Local variant DB reference before. Okay, so let's do instead from DB import create as create in memory DB. Creating memory DB. Okay. Mock stage executioner is not defined. Yeah, so do mock stage executioner. Perhaps we need to do self here. There we go. And we want to do db dot. It has, I think, store create object, store pipelines, and then I want this. So we populate the DB with the pipeline. So this is similar to what we did in the server test. But now this is more like a unit test. The compilation here still does a lot of stuff. And not sure that's good or not, but leave it like that for now. So let's see if that works. Syntax error. Oops. Yeah, okay. So this right here must be called in an async IO loop, I guess. So, and the mock stage execution. Okay. So let's do async def run, and then do async io dot run. Is this how you do it? Run. Start server run. Yeah, this. Okay. Yeah, and then we need to wait this one. Cool. Key error index. Yeah, okay, so this memory database needs to be initialized. Await db.init. Okay, cool. And now we can do, where's the job controller? Trigger. We can do await job controller trigger with some object that matches type test arg 9, something like that. Yeah, and mock stage executioner does not have attribute start process. So what was the, this is what we need to implement in our mock. So let's just do nothing for now. And this will probably have to like return pass or fail. But yeah, let's do this for now. That works, okay. But yeah, I think I will end this video here. So this was an example how I wanted to flesh out this trigger functionality, but I didn't want to test it through the end-to-end test. So I refactored the code to isolate this job controller in a class which can more easily be tested without starting a separate server process and without involving like the whole world. So hopefully this job controller test suite can have a lot of example pipelines and triggered in various ways, and we can more easily test test this functionality, making sure the stages call each other and the pipeline gets a pass or fail depending on the stuff. So let's commit what we've got. So this is start on more isolated test for job controller. Start off. That's it. I'll see you in 1 week.